This
Okay,
meeting.
sorry about that. We're now live, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. My apologies to one and all for the IT glitches and my limited ability to solve IT glitches. If it all works, I'm fine. If it doesn't, I panic totally. So my apologies. Let us get started. We're 5 minutes late, I'm afraid. So welcome everybody to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Board for today. The substitutes, do we have any substitutes nominated this evening, please?
No, Chair, everyone's here tonight.
Good, and I gather there was Sarah Courtney, Councillor Courtney was having difficulty getting a link. Is she with us this evening?
Yeah, I'm here, thank you though, Ashley.
Yeah, good, Sarah. I noticed that you got problems. Okay, so members' interests. To remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to the items on the agenda. Anybody wish to declare anything at the moment?
Can I declare a non-pecuniary interest as chair of SACRE?
Indeed, and I think you may be telling us all about it later on, Sheila.
All being well.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, please, Ashley. Can I declare a non-pecuniary interest as a member of SACRE? Thank you.
Indeed, thank you.
And can I do the same as well, Councillor Evans, please? I'm a member of SACRE as well.
Indeed, thanks very much, Brenda. Okay, no more declarations. Thank you. Admission to the public. It's not recommended the public be excluded from this meeting for the consideration of this agenda, so welcome those who have chosen to join us. Minutes of the last meeting on the 14th of December. Members will have received copies of that. Does anybody have any comments to make on that in terms of accuracy, or can we accept them as a true record? Can't see any hands raised there, so
I'm just going to propose we accept them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've caught up, I hope, a little bit after my late arrival. First item, substantive item, item 5 on the agenda is the Cabinet draft budget proposals. Just to remind members that this is an opportunity to consider the Cabinet budget proposals specifically in relation to Children and Young People's Directorate. As you know, individual boards will feed into the Strategy and Performance Board, who will consider the overall impact of the Council and collate all responses, and will refer them to Cabinet on Monday the 13th of February, who in turn will put forward their final recommendations at Budget Council on the 27th of February. So I thought that was useful just to remind us all and anybody who's tuning in what's going on in relation to this particular item. So any comments, any questions, any queries? Who's going to do the original part of the presentation on this one, please?
Shall I set out the overview, Councillor Evans, for Children's Scrutiny? And we are joined this evening by Councillor Sylvia Dacre is with us as well, and Councillor Adam Wilkinson is here, and I'm sure they'll want to comment if it is the Labour Cabinet's proposals. But shall I take you through just the headlines? Yeah, okay. I think it's quite clear from the report that all councils have got a budget gap at the moment, a significant budget gap. And the report does set out some of the reasons why, but some of this is due to the demand pressures within children's social care and in adult social care as well. And you can see in the report there is a line there that's showing there is a £2.8 million pressure in children's services. And in the main, this is to do with the placement costs for our looked after children. So what's happening is that we're buying in more foster placements than we used to. Our own number of foster carers in Calderdale is decreasing, not increasing as we would like. We're buying in more residential placements that are more expensive because we haven't got enough foster placements nationally or indeed in Calderdale. And the unit cost, we have discussed this previously at Scrutiny, and there is a report this evening on external placements as well. The unit cost has risen year on year, and you have got some graphs in the presentation to show that to you. There is a national shortage of social workers. And we, like every other council, are having to employ some agency staff to make sure the social work teams are fully staffed, but that costs significantly more money too. So we're spending a lot on children's looked after placements. We're spending more money on agency staff. But what you'll see in the cabinet proposals is that there are no savings required in the coming year for children's services. So there are no lines and no expected savings. And that's the case for 23-24. You will see that there is a line in there for 500,000 for early years investment. This is the council prudently setting aside some funding should there be a need to invest in more sufficient childcare places. We have seen since COVID a number of childcare providers in the borough closing, and the council has to make sure there's sufficient places. So there's a prudent line in there for that funding. I think you asked about some of the risks prior to scrutiny. What are the risks? And the risks are really exactly around what I've said, is that it's recognised nationally by the Josh McAllister Social Care Review that took place in 2022 that there needs to be a lot more investment in children's social care services in the whole country. Josh McAllister was talking about billions, not millions, billions, so saying that that's the shortfall. We're waiting to hear the outcome of the Josh McAllister review recommendations. The government are actually going to respond to these in the coming week. So it would be good, probably at a scrutiny before you finish at the year end, for you to hear some more detail on which recommendations have been accepted and what's going to happen in response to that. We've got the rising cost of placements, and we've had the Competition and Markets Authority look at the rising costs of placements in the country, but there is no action being taken to cap costs or address those escalating costs. And I think that will continue to be a risk to us and to other councils as well. The rising cost of agency staff is being considered by the government, and we do think we'll get a response as part of the Josh McAllister review to actually put a cap on agency costs, the maximum agencies can charge us, and to bring some more regulation and guidance around that I think will help us and all councils. In the longer term, we've got to encourage more people in Calderdale to foster, and we've got to encourage more people to come into the social work profession. So those are the major risks really around the areas, the major overspending areas, which I've just covered. So that's it really in a nutshell, Councillor Evans. I'm not sure whether Councillor Dacre or Councillor Wilkinson want to add anything to what I've said, and then we can get into questions.
I'd be very happy to hear from either of those cabinet members if they wish to contribute at this point. Adam, Councillor Wilkinson, yes, please.
Thanks, Ashley.
You're going to come back with all the answers, I hope.
Oh, no, definitely not. But Julie's covered most of it, really. It's been an incredibly tough time for councils, and I feel like we've been saying that for years and years and years. But I think in particular now, with the cost of living and inflationary pressures that we've had, as well as sort of 12 years of austerity and all the pressures in social care, which Julie described, I think it's been a bit of a perfect storm in a lot of ways. Despite the sort of pressures that we have faced over the last 12 to 13 years, we have done our best largely to protect the CYP Directorate and the Adults Directorate, particularly the social care bit of our directorate. It's not something that we would be looking to make cuts in. And obviously a lot of what we do is actually statutory. So, there are different ways that you can deliver things, but they are services that we have to deliver. We've got no choice. And those services within adults and children now make up around 70% of the council's entire budget. So it's not the services that you probably get that much casework on in your inbox as councillors on a daily basis. It's why are so many potholes on my street? Why are my bins not being collected, etc., etc. But those sorts of issues, there's only 30% of the budget left to deal with everything else once you've taken adults and children into consideration. you know, despite the fact that we have done our utmost to protect children's services, you know, there are still major challenges on the budget as Julie described, but we are doing what we can in terms of trying to sort of address the budget pressures on external placements. And I think, you know, you'll hear more about that in the agenda item that's later in the meeting. But just briefly to say that, you know, we've got another internal residential home that's being set up at the moment, and a further one which we've identified a potential property and works ongoing to see if that's viable. But as Julie described, you know, we really do need full widespread reform of the entire social care system, really, as described in the McAllister report, if we are really going to address the challenges that all councils are facing in this area. And just one final thing I just wanted to mention, which I had hoped would be included in the budget proposals for this year's budget, but we're having to bring forward and look at a later date, is a potential council tax exemption for foster carers, which I think has been discussed at corporate parenting in the past.
Yep.
Because what other councils have done is they've have brought in an exemption for foster carers and actually seen an increase in the number of foster carers. So it's actually been an invest to save investment. So I think that would be a really good thing to look at going forward. And it's obviously, you know, an incentive for our foster carers that we already have to stay with the council as well and not be tempted away by either. So I just wanted to mention that for those of you that are on corporate parenting that might be thinking, you know, what's happened to that? Why has that not been brought forward as part of the budget process? I'm advised by finance colleagues that it needs to be looked at as part of a whole review of council tax rather than just be something that we just bring forward separately. So I'll leave it at that and just let Councillor Dacre come in with any further comments that she might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Councillor Dacre, Sylvia, some additions from you perhaps?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, to say that the settlement, it is a provisional settlement, but they very rarely change very much except at the very margins. Provisional settlement was better than everybody in local government had feared. However, without, and I don't want to be political about this, but simply, even though it's a better settlement than we expected, and it does give us a rise in core spending power, it doesn't anywhere near return us to the position we were before we had to start making the cuts that are set out on page 12 of the budget document.
Indeed.
The improvement in our position is also dependent upon us, as with every other council, increasing council tax and the social care precept to the maximum allowed without a referendum. And it's expected effectively by government that we do this, because when they give the headline increase in spending power, that is factored in. And of course, if we didn't take those additions this year, we would lose it forever because it's cumulative. So I've only heard of one council so far that has not taken the maximum because we're all desperate for it. Then I'd also note that page 5, where I think, as has already been mentioned, we've put grants where appropriate to manage pressures in adults and, as is relevant to here, children's social care, because clearly it's an area where we know, as you've heard, the pressures outlined. I suppose the other thing I'd just spread a bit of gloom with is that I went to a local government finance conference a week or so ago, and the permanent secretary from Department of Levelling Up and Communities said that the McAllister report is quite costly, isn't it? And it's got a lot of recommendations. I'm sure it'll be implemented in spirit, which I just thought was profoundly depressing to hear that from somebody of that level of authority at this stage, when we haven't yet had the, you know, as we've heard, that the process is still supposed to be being worked through. But to me, it was pretty clear that it's going to be a bit like, I suspect, the report into private children's homes, where there'll be an acknowledgement that things are wrong, but no sufficiently adequate measures to deal with it. So I am very concerned that councils are not going to get the help they need to deal with the problems that the McAllister report outlines. One other interesting thing that was said at that meeting, which is a bit general but might be worth considering, is that there was a lot of talk about council tax and how it raises differing amounts in different areas, and the poorer areas with lower value housing raise less than more wealthy areas. And somebody did say that it shouldn't be up to us to try to effectively raise the taxes to deal with these national problems. And at the moment, that's what we're being expected to do. And as you've heard from Adam, that means that just increasing amounts of our budget are taken up with these really important areas for adults and children, but squeezing everything else that everybody thinks that we should be doing and we think we should be doing. So unless there's any questions, I think that's all I want to say.
I'm sure there might be the odd question, Sylvia, but thank you for that. And I have to say, I respect your lack of political statement there and professionally dancing around it, because it is, and I say that with all due respect, that I think it's appropriate because of the difficulties we're all presented with. And I think that talking particularly as we do in this group about the children and young people side of things, I think our department is doing overall a very good job in terms of all the limitations which it has. And I'm very much aware, I mean, I've been a counsellor since 2010, and we've always had the problem with not enough foster carers, or we can't pay them enough. We've always had the problem of having to fund expensive places out of area with commercial organisations, which has put huge pressure on the whole organisation and knock on in terms of the other directorates by implication. So I recognise all those issues. I guess that we have to try and look at the things which can improve the situation or make it less bad, might be a more accurate description. And I'm pleased to see the proactive move towards more of our own children's homes in the borough, which is going to make significant. That truly is an invest to save area of things, and we've got to try and break this sort of vicious downward spiral of foster carer problems, isn't it? Numbers and availability, and it's interesting to hear Councillor Wilkinson bring forward again the tax exemption, which could and should help a little bit there. However, I shall stop rabbiting on and sympathising, empathising with this one. Members, questions, comments, queries on all of this? I think we're all stunned into silence, are we, by the...
Councillor Monteith, please, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Brenda.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a slightly oblique question, but in relation to the very high costs of out of authority placements of children, and the news that came out yesterday with regard to the Doncaster situation, where vast sums of money were being spent on placements which were totally inadequate and unsuitable. Have we got any kind of assurance that we're not in the position of having any such placements like that, where vast sums of money, you know, £250,000 a year being spent on a placement that actually was abusing the children that were in it? And as I say, it's not strictly budget, but it is budget insofar as we need to be very conscious that we are looking at those placements very, very critically all the time. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, fine. I've sent an email later on this afternoon. I don't know whether you picked it up, Julie, but yeah, I mean, can you make us feel comfortable about that situation, and whether hopefully we don't employ any more of those which have been employed in Doncaster.
Yeah, I will respond to that. Thanks, Councillor Evans. I have emailed you back, but it wasn't until
Yes, thank you. I had time to get up yet.
Yeah, it wasn't until about 5 o'clock. And what I've said is the government decided to ask the National Children's Safeguarding Panel to undertake a review when the concerns came out about the Hesley provision, which is what you're talking about, isn't it, Councillor Monteith, in Doncaster. So as part of that national review, every council in the whole of England was asked to review every single placement for children with disabilities and complex health needs. And these were very expensive placements because they were providing children's social care, but they were also registered as schools. So they had a dual provision. So we've been asked to review every single child that we have in that type of placement to see how safe they are, to have a look at all of their records, their voice, speak to the parents and the staff, etc. And I'm pleased to tell you that we do not have any children placed in that type of accommodation in Calderdale. So I have just sent a note back to Councillor Evans to that effect, and just to let him know that we did let the Children's Safeguarding Partnership know that we did that piece of work, and we've also let corporate parenting know what the outcome of that was as well.
Great.
Thanks very much, Councillor.
That's pleasing. Di Jury, I think you had your hand up. Did I see somewhere there? Did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I think Julie's covered it. Just wanted to give that reassurance, but I think Julie's covered it. So we've made those safeguarding checks. We don't have any young people in Calderdale in any of those establishments or any similar establishments elsewhere. When we are placing children in external provision, I mean, Guy and Lucy are on the call to talk later, but we do run through an assurance process as well. So we check, that there's been any LADO concerns. Obviously, we check Ofsted rating. I know that didn't go well with the Doncaster situation, but we make all our due diligence checks, I think, before we place any child in any settings like that. But we don't have currently any children with those sort of special complex needs in those specialist residential schools, which was the issue with the Doncaster situation.
Yeah, thanks, Di. You use the expression LADO. For those who aren't aware of these things, please could you extend that? Sorry.
So the checks with the LADO is the local authority designated officers. So they are the ones, person in every authority to whom any safeguarding concerns are reported. So if there had been any, as in the Doncaster situation, we know that there have been a number of complaints and concerns raised, haven't they, with Ofsted, with the local authority. They would have gone to their LADO, their designated person to investigate. So when we are placing children in any establishments, we make our checks that there've not been any, concerns raised about that establishment, and get the full background and history as part of our diligence checks.
Indeed, I just thought it was useful for those who are perhaps more peripheral to all of this to know what it was about. Thank you. Councillor Dacre, Sylvia, you've got your hand up.
Yes, it was just to say that I would have expected that we wouldn't have problems. I remember 3 years ago or something when I was a member of this panel. I remember a conversation where officers were challenged about exactly this sort of question: how much do we know about the places the external placements that were putting children in? And I think at that stage the scrutiny was satisfied that appropriate and searching and curious enquiries were made and checks were made, and it wasn't a process that was entered into lightly, putting children in that distant accommodation. And I think so, and I wouldn't have expected it to have changed since. So I would have been astonished if we would have ended up in the mess that Doncaster have ended up in, or the other councils, because it's not just Doncaster, is it? Other councils have ended up in putting children there.
Yeah. Indeed, but you would also expect us to ask the question, wouldn't you, so that we can get sort of public confidence on that one. Councillor Foster Dot, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask a bit more about the early years investment money that's been put aside. And really, I'm glad to see that this is in place. I think that's a really useful thing to have sort of in the bag should we need it. But I just wondered what the picture is at the moment, and how likely you think it is that we might need to actually use that money to enhance early years provision if we end up with a shortage of numbers. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Foster. Yes, it's a changing picture virtually daily, with new providers coming on stream and then people deciding to leave the business. What we're seeing is some schools are very successfully running nursery provision in some areas, but we know we've got pressure in other areas. We do have a team within the council who works under the Assistant Director Education, as I'm sure you know. Nikki Woods is the manager of that team. She has a whole team of sufficiency officers, not a huge team, but making sure that we've got eyes on the different parts of the borough and what's available. And of course, it's not just childcare, you know, as you'd know it, you know, for younger children, it's actually out of school clubs as well, and holiday provision. So Nikki's keeping a close eye on that. It may be something that Scrutiny would like a briefing note on. I don't think it warrants a full report, but if I ask Nikki to pull together what the current state of position, it changes all of the time. We're just about there at the minute. We're okay, but we've got to be mindful that people are feeling, particularly with the rising cost of living and the fuel bills and the payment that we're making to early years staff, which is funded by the government, is all creating a squeeze within that market. So if you'd like, Councillor Foster, I know Nikki's off this week, but when she's back next week, I'll ask her to do a briefing note for children's scrutiny, just on the current position, bearing in mind it will change.
I think that would be really helpful, just so we've got oversight of what the current position is, and then we can maybe revisit it in 6 months' time or something, and just have another briefing note and see how things are.
Yeah,
but yeah, thanks very much for that, Julie.
Not a problem.
Good. So I don't think I've seen. I thought we were going to get all sorts of wonderful ideas coming forward that Cabinet wouldn't have thought of, that would solve all our problems. Are there other problems outside the ones of the children's homes and the looking after children elsewhere? Are there other issues which are problems which we may be able to solve, or that you're working on, that you can give us a little bit of comfort in relation to, Julie and your colleagues?
I won't steal Lucy Kavanagh's thunder, because she's on Scrutiny this evening, Councillor Evans, but she's the head of our fostering team. And in the presentation that you've got coming up next on the agenda, there is actually a slide there around fostering recruitment. Okay. And I'd like Lucy to cover that into that item, because Absolutely. She can talk in much more detail than I can about what's happening on the ground to encourage people to foster for us.
Yes, indeed. No, I wouldn't dream of trying to have that thunder stolen. I'm just trying to focus in on the areas where we do have problems, and whether there's really anything. I know I've asked you this question numerous times, and you know, you haven't had a brilliant brainwave lately then on any of these things. Or are there other things where, I don't know, we as councillors, we as an organisation could be looking at, which could help improve the situation? I mean, probably your answer is not really, but I noticed that Sylvia's got her hand up as well. Are you coming back on this one, Councillor Dacre?
Well, yes. If you're talking about areas, budgetary areas where we have a problem, then of course the obvious one is the one on page 14, the home to school transport for children with special educational needs, which is clearly demand led. And we have tried to adjust the budget to make it fit for purpose, but it's difficult because the demand is continually going up. If anybody out there has some innovative solutions for this, every council in the country would be delighted to hear from you, because we are actually suffering less badly than some councils from this. We're managing it better, but it's another of those, like children's accommodation and adult social care, it's demand led, and it's really, really hard for councils to manage ever increasing demand. So yes, any brainwaves, you'd probably make yourself a fortune.
Yeah, I mean, a number of issues are demand-led, aren't they? That doesn't necessarily mean you can't do anything about them. It means maybe you have to be even more innovative, or come up with the really bright solution, which you are obviously seeking there, Sylvia, which I respect on that one. Jackie, Julie, I always want to call you Jackie. You know, The common thing. I'm really sorry. I'm useless at names generally, and I insist. My head insists on calling you Jackie. Julie, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, I would. Just to let members know that we have put an application into the Department for Education for a new special school for Calderdale. We'd really love this to be based in North Halifax because we know the need is there. So we have put an application in for a through school, so it would be primary through to secondary. If we are successful, it'd mean a huge investment coming into the borough, which would be great. But what it would mean is more local special school places for our children, and that transport budget would be reduced because we wouldn't have to go outside the borough. Because what's happening is if we can't find a special school place because of the pressure on places in Calderdale, young people are travelling outside the borough, and it does cost a lot of money in a taxi. So it's just to let you know, we have heard from the DFE to say that we should know, hopefully, sometime in February. So, you know, keep your fingers crossed for that one. If we get that, that would be a fantastic boost for us and great provision for our young people. It'd take time to get it up and running, a couple of years probably, but it'd be a fabulous outcome. So we're hopeful at the moment.
That's very good to hear, Julie. It's one of those. It is one of those sort of bright ideas which clearly sort of sidesteps all the issues there. That's really good to hear. Any other comments or whatever? We're not going to be feeding much back into the system, are we? We're not coming up with many bright ideas as to how we could or should be doing it, and we're not being able to say well, you haven't thought about this, have you? Which is, yes, understandable, really. Councillor Issett, you've got a fabulous idea which is going to save us lots of money. I see your hand is up.
Not a fabulous idea, but something that I asked for back in September time. I think in order to be able to make proper suggestions into how we can make money, we need to have this discussion earlier than now. So I did ask if it could be put on the works programme to have a budgetary discussion in maybe October time with some figures that we could then take away and return to, because like we got some figures today, didn't we? At 9 o'clock this morning, which obviously I've not seen until just before the meeting. And it's very hard to make informed decisions when you're only getting the information at very short notice. So I just think, and when I raised it in September, the response was that there was going to be a new budget process. So things like that would be happening anyway, but obviously nothing has changed. And I appreciate that we've had quite a lot of sort of change in terms of the financial management of the council, with the chief financial officer coming and leaving quite quickly. But I think if we really do want to make big changes, we need to have the information early and have these discussions much earlier than we are doing now. I wonder if that could be put into the works programme for next year.
I think that's a very valid comment and much appreciated. You raised it again. Any responses on that one? Any thoughts on that one for perhaps cabinet members or senior officers here as to whether we could or should be looking at things in a better time frame? Adam, Councillor Wilkinson, I think your hand's up there. It's not a sort of follow-up. Yep.
Yeah, it was just to point out that we do have regular reports on finances that come to cabinet. So we have the MTFS and we have regular sort of outturn reports and things, and they report on the sort of budgetary position of each directorate regularly. So, I mean, I guess what Councillor Issett's probably saying is that perhaps those things should be considered by CYP in like earlier on in the financial year, perhaps. But yeah, just to say that all that information is sort of like regularly available in cabinet, in the cabinet reports.
That we need to make better use of it and so on. There's one or two hands have been thrown up as a result of that. Councillor Dacre, I think you were the first, and then Councillor Issett followed up quickly, and Mike as well. So Sylvia, do you want to come back?
Yes, it's right. We do the sort of information. I don't know quite what document you're talking about this morning. I take it it's not the budget consultation. It'd be just a sheet with the directorate budget on it itself. And similar, that information is always contained in the revenue monitors. And yes, at the moment, those are automatically referred to Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Committee, but they're not referred to other scrutiny panels, because most of it isn't of concern to an individual panel. So it's certainly at some point after those have come, you might want to look at that, because that would the difficulty in, I suppose, in terms of and that would help you keep a track of how things were going in the directorate through the year, and actually have a chance to discuss it rather than simply maybe sitting and reading the document yourself. I think the difficulty in some ways in trying to determine what you might want to do in the budget earlier in the year is that actually things change so much, and it's impossible to know where you are until you get the provisional settlement, which isn't provisionally finalised until something like the 19th of December. So we had sort of made a stab at what we thought the position would be, and then in fact we were better off than we thought we were going to be. So it's really difficult. I mean, the previous year I'd asked for us to start doing it much earlier, and in reality it is just very difficult because things change, and you are so dependent when we're only getting 1 year settlements from the government, you're so dependent on knowing information that you don't get until late December. So that's how I'd suggest you might try and deal with it, but it would be difficult to actually then start formulating budget decisions, I think.
I think it should be possible to look at some of the issues earlier on, and perhaps we need to have a think about that. I recognise if you haven't got a specific settlement to work with, it's going to make life a bit more difficult. Councillor Isett, you wanted to come back, and then Mike.
Yeah, I think it's as well, when you look at the budget, we get sort of like the one that was sent out this morning, it has things like children, early intervention and safeguarding. Well, as a scrutiny member and somebody who works in education, I don't know what that actually really means. And I did a piece of work in the summer, and Julie was great. So I have to say thank you, because I sent quite a few emails to Julie in the summer, and she sent me a lot of information back, because I was trying to understand what these headings actually mean. Because if you want us to come up with some ideas, for example, premises related on the document today had 111,236. I have no idea what that premises related means, if that makes sense. So to be able to come up with really sort of sensible suggestions, we need as a group maybe to really understand what all that information means. And that's what I really wanted to start doing earlier in the year. So for example, Councillor Dacre said there was a transport related issue. Well, we could have been having these discussions in October maybe, but it's far too late now. So I just like next year to be just drilling down into what those figures mean. It would be really good actually to have an agenda item where somebody came and fully explained what all the headings and areas of the budget actually meant.
Interesting
Really.
thought. I'm sure
Thank
we
you.
could and should be doing something sooner in the year. Sorry. Mike, did you want to?
Just in terms, to pick up on Councillor Isett's point in terms of the scrutiny process over the next few weeks on the budget, the Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Board will pull together a report to go to Cabinet that will do three things, at least three things. One will be to forward questions and comments from each of the scrutiny boards to Cabinet. The second will be to take a council-wide look at the budget proposal. So, for example, seeing if there are common themes around workforce, for example. And thirdly, to look at and examine things around the budget process. So that's a place for Councillor Isett's comments to go in. Partly that's because Strategy and Performance had a workshop the other week that Councillor Dacre was at, looking at an enterprising council or commercialisation, or however it wants to refer to, and Isabel Britton, the interim director of head of finance, was talking about wanting to work with scrutiny on some of the proposals going forward rather than them just coming at the end. So that's one thing that may be contained in that report. And I know from discussions at the finance briefing that Lee Holden did, and also Adults Health and Social Care, I think there was some discussion about the 5 officer working parties that are set out in the report of Cabinet, with issues like salary and cost rebasing exercise, and actually looking and the scrutiny boards asking whether it's possible to get engaged in some of those discussions on the way rather than at the end. So I think there are opportunities to to pick up on the issues that Councillor Research has been raising.
And I think that one would be certainly one of my preferred items to feedback would be just that I've always felt that we do end up in it too late, and it's too late to do much anyway, and we don't have much time to actually think about it in the detail required or the depth of understanding as Councillor has highlighted. So I'd like to think that goes forward and we look at doing something more in future. We'll take that seriously. Any other comments on this particular item of the agenda? Don't think so there. So thank you for that. Let's move on to item number 6, which is the much trailed residential services and external placements. Julie, are you going to kick this one off, or did you say that one of your colleagues will be doing so?
Yeah, there are a couple of officers here this evening from residential and fostering side and die as well. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves to Children's Scrutiny. You've got a presentation in your pack that's quite detailed, and it's got a lot of lovely, rich detail in it. So I don't propose, because of time, we go through all of that with you. I'm expecting, obviously, that members like you will have read that. So it'd be really good to get into some of the discussions. We've already kind of touched on it this evening. So I'll hand over to Di and Guy and Lucy to introduce themselves. Thanks, Councillor Evans.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Just to say hello, I think most people probably might know me on the call, but to introduce myself, I'm Di Drury, so I'm the Assistant Director for Early Intervention and Safeguarding, and 2 of my managers are here today, so I'll let them introduce themselves. Guy, do you want to start?
Yeah, evening everyone. My name is Guy Grund. I'm responsible individual for residential services and essentially responsible for all children's homes and operation that in Calderdale.
Thank you, Guy. And your other colleague?
Guy. And Lucy?
Hi everyone. I'm Lucy Kavanagh. I'm a service manager. My responsible areas are fostering, the leaving care service, pathways and our therapeutic service. But I'm also operationally responsible for how we use our external placements. So I'm not a commissioner, but I take a lead from the service.
Good. So who's going to, it says here that this is an opportunity for members to receive an update on the latest developments on the council's external placements and the continued work and support of our residential homes provided for Calderdale children. So are you going to kick off on that one, Lucy, or Guy?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
It's probably more your area to start with.
I think everyone's had sight of obviously the presentation that we put together. It's just a bit different, and I just think sometimes illustrations kind of read a little bit better than reading, text on text. And we've, we reflect back on where we're at this year. We've probably had a bit of a tougher season than we normally would with regulators, but I don't want that to kind of be a margin of where the services really are. What I can reflect on is that we're really a committed service. I've got a relatively new management team. We talk about experience of, some have been in 9 months and some have been in as young as 3 years, which is not an awful long time for the responsibility of the job. But what I can say is that there's been lots of strength factors within our service, and we collectively think one of its key strengths is partnership work and being connected with health, education, social care, and extended partners. We think this is probably one of as key, I suppose, successes within our kind of more transparent in service. And I suppose the one thing beyond most, any providers, whether the private providers or local authorities, our reputation and relationships with Ofsted, I would say, in my own opinion, and 20 years I've been doing this, are exemplary. We have we're closely connected to them, and equally we're pretty transparent where it kind of works both ways. I suppose looking at, I've obviously listened. I always want to stay optimistic. I don't want everything to kind of be doom and gloom, because I think we're a service that's thriving, and obviously we're a service that's got ambition to expand. And obviously that's come, with a kind of council commitment. But so we've currently got five children's homes on this portfolio. One's short breaks, disabilities. We've got 2 5-bedders. We've got 1 3-bedder, and we've got Oldgate House, which is a 3-bedder. Which is we're just waiting for registration now for Ofsted. which is really kind of positive move for us. And I think it's kind of uplifted the service, you know, certainly from a staff perspective, that people are really kind of confident of where that's going to go. So, and it also kind of lends itself to, you know, looking after his own. And I think it's been a bit of a council pledge anyway. But I think what I do realise is that whilst we have young people on our own doorstep where we've got hands-on, our route to services are far slicker, the quicker. As relationships with his peers across services as just kind of, I suppose, as coronavirus did this to us, it just kind of galvanized, you know, how successful we are in partnership work. You know, we're only one phone call away from resolution. If any kind of challenges we come across, there's a wider systemic thinking around it all, and generally we come up with the best solution, with best outcome. So we looked at all kind of sorts of, we're looking at purchasing properties off open market. The one in Brighouse was purchased off an open market, but obviously there's a volatile kind of spike in property prices, and that's certainly, you know, increased over the last 18 months, and probably outprices in some respects, but we're mindful of how that money's spent, and it's spent wisely, creating business space, but also buying a property that's future-proof, but provides a service to young people that you know, certainly long outdoes my work life. We're looking at his own estate as well. We're seeing what's available within his own estate. We're looking at land. We're looking at buildings that could be modified or kind of, you know, developed in a way that meets, you know, current standards, you know, and expectations to health and safety and fire safety, because essentially we want to create environments that are not only homely for young people, but essentially safe for everyone who's in there, whether it's young people and staff as a business space. I mean, experience of timelines compared against private sector markets, and we've got a good measure on this, is that Calderdale, I was probably a bit reticent to start off with where could we achieve the timelines of what private sector do, and what I am pleased to say is that we are very much on the same pace and same trajectory, which is promising, because there's so many layers that in local authority that we've got to go through to get to that. But it means that all the right people in the right places kind of making the right decisions, which is, for me, has been brilliant. And I think, you know, we talk about being connected, not just with his peers, but, you know, as superiors are very much on board with this and invested as much as we are. And I come from a place of passion with it. You know, these guys that are coming from probably a business element of it, which is good. It means that I can speak to anyone at any point and I'm going to get, you know, the answer that I'm looking for. The thing about, I suppose, moving forward is that I think the one challenge, and I said this in an email, and I think it's a common denominator across, you know, nationally, is recruitment. It's always going to be a challenge. Calderdale is quite densely populated with a lot of childcare provisions, whether it's children's homes, post-16, supported living. So they kind of, the recruitment market does get saturated. But and we've raised our standard. We want to put right people in front of right young people to make sure that they get the kind of very best deal. And I think that's his point of reference. So yeah, a successful year in so many respects, but so many learns as well. And I don't kind of make allowances for his shortfalls. I think what we do well as a service is that we recognise the shortfalls and we act upon them pretty swiftly. So all in all, I sit here and it's quite easy for me to say, yeah, you're in safe hands. And I firmly believe the service is in safe hands. I think the people who are providing care to these young people and the measures and lengths to go to safeguard them is another level. It's quite surprising. And it's kind of started out, we've probably had a tough season with regulators, but when I reflect back, we are more outstanding this year than we was last year, but as judgments don't kind of suggest that, which is, it's a shame. And then when we reflected on what the shortfalls were, the margins are minor, and the remedy behind it. Both homes that have been downgraded from outstanding this time to good, there was less than an hour's work in each home to put that right. And if that's a measure, I will take the good as an outstanding, and the feedback reflects that. The report is the information I put into this presentation is directly cited from Ofsted's feedback. But I also put in there, obviously for everyone to read, is the unregulated feedback. Our real critics are like parents, families, social workers, health professionals, these people who work with us every day will get a real feel for what we do. So I sit here in quite a privileged and proud position of where our services are, and with it expanding, I can only think that young people are going to have a better running shot at life as a result of being in our care, which is a win-win for me.
Thank you, Guy. I think Councillor Tremaine has her hand up. I can certainly see. Diana, did you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, if I could, that'd be great. Thank you, Guy. Couple of things, if that's okay. One of the ones that I know when Councillor Evans and I were talking about it before, I felt like what I really wanted to have added to this was a bit more voice of the child. I felt like there was a lot of there was feedback, obviously the Ofsted feedback, which, as you say, it's come directly from the reports, family, staff, but I kind of felt like that was missing. Kind of what were the children in those placements feeling about it, and how did they feel they were being related to? And I kind of felt like being on the fostering panel as well, that's one of the things we always ask about is the voice of the child in the reports, and it would have been just really nice to get a bit more of a sense of that, I think. And I know that you added some extra information in an email previously around we were asking about the North Halifax and the requires improvement and the good bit, and again you explained kind of how that had moved on, and that's really positive. In a sort of slightly strange way, I almost wanted I think it's on page 52 of the report, and you'd highlighted that requires improvement and some of the feedback there. I felt like there perhaps was some of the, not that I want to see the negative things, but it would have been really interesting to see some of the bits a little bit more directly, which said this is the bit to work on, and then you could really clearly signpost to what changed there, just for sort of clarity for us, really, because obviously I can tell from what you've said how much work has been going into it and the commitment to it. So that was my points.
You want to come back?
You want me to respond? Would you like me to respond?
Yeah.
Yeah. I fully acknowledge the child's voice, and it's not an oversight. It's not something that's ignored. I think it's something that's very core, and it's very prevalent within everyday practice. And I've just been evaluating some information today from an independent visitor, and what I did actually celebrate within that report is actually the child does exercise the voice, and maybe that could have been profiled a little bit more. But I think sometimes when we're looking at timelines, I think there's a 6-year timeline in the graphs of where we've progressed or maintained outstanding or good. It's just to understand that the challenge that we have with regulators as well, and I think it's important to see that whilst I don't want a judgment to define us, I think that there's things within that actually surpass what outstanding norms are doing in private sector. We're challenged by very different means, and I suppose what I don't want to kind of dwell on is the shortfalls, and I kind of referred to that we're developing service, and I think a key factor, without defaming anyone who was involved with the setbacks that we've had in their home at North Halifax, I think it's important to kind of realise we knew that we come short on certainly some measures. They were kind of referred to that primary care was given to complex young people and in emergency situations. So it kind of pulled people away from what their normal duties was, because the focus was to make sure that young people were safeguarded and that primary care were present. I acknowledge that, I don't want reports just to reflect the kind of downside of things. I always sit with optimism. And I know how hard the work that people put in on a daily basis, takes, not just in Calderdale, but in any kind of children's home. I suppose we've been in my areas that we've always got to kind of claim that we're a learning environment. Well, I think we've all got to work on ourselves. We've all got to work on what we improve. And I think it's like I says, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, we were an outstanding service across board. This year, the judgment don't reflect that. But I don't want that to kind of be a measure of what the outputs that's happening in service. I think some of the work that's gone in, and certainly the safeguarding work, it's certainly not celebrated enough, because I think it's exemplary. And I think, partners, and specifically when we speak about police and interventions in different areas, I think we're quite highly revered in that area, which is a strength in itself. But you know, equally, if we're just about finding balance to a report, and that was the aim of this. It's not hiding behind anything, and I think, you know, certainly his relationship with Ofsted has been a key indicator to that. You know, we've remained transparent throughout, because what we don't want to do is walk around with a burden of being disguised in his work. It's something we won't do, and it's something, you know, we kind of pride ourselves on.
I think that's absolutely fair enough, Guy, and I think all of us on this board would recognise there's some really, really good stuff going on there, and there are lots of positives, and it's really good to hear that. But I think we also have to take into account as a scrutiny board that even the best organisations can improve, and it's useful to know, yeah, this is all good, it's all good stuff, great to hear, and all those sorts of things. And I'm not, you know, pushing that down. It is very important. If that wasn't happening, we'd be in a real concern about the things. But what we'd like also to get in a scrutiny situation is where you feel you can improve and what your targets are in terms of improving, because all of us can always get better. So I think I would just sort of support Diana's part of what Diana was saying there, in terms of we like to see you saying, well, this is all going very well, but we feel we could do even better in these areas, and this is what we're going to be doing. So I don't want you to think we're sort of, you know, beating you over the head.
No,
we're trying to be the critical friend here, and say, let's have a look at some of those issues as well. Di, you I think wanted to come in. Was it in that sort of context?
It was, yes. Thank you, Councillor Evans. It was just to add briefly to what Guy said. I think he's covered it very well, and just to say that some of the issues we were having, particularly with the North Halifax home last summer, when I just come into post, and we were dealing with a very difficult situation there. But just also for a little bit of context is to say, you know, the particular young cohort of young people we got in there presented some real difficult challenges that they'd also been impossible to place in external placements, at least 2 of them, you know. So going out to the market previously to try and find placements for those young people was proven impossible. So the level of challenge, if you like, and complexity that, you know, those older teenagers are presenting at times, and that the home we're dealing with was quite remarkable. So I think it's an important context of that there, and the staff were really committed to those young people. Yes, there was the outcome that was very disappointing. A lot of it was about technicalities. I don't want, you know, members to think it was about, you know, basic safeguarding. I think the children were really, really well cared for, and we're confident of that. There were technical issues, there were things that should have been addressed, and there were some issues around the leadership in the home. So just to say very quickly, we addressed that. We got an action plan in place. The actual management of that particular home has changed. I think Guy's been, you know, all over it really, and has introduced some new quality assurance processes as well for all the homes. So we've brought more rigour really into our quality assurance. So yes, you know, we've absolutely got things to learn, and I think the service has taken those lessons on board. So I just wanted to give that bit of feedback as well, and that bit of context. Thank you.
Appreciated. Thank you, and taken on board from us. Dot, you had a question or a comment?
Thank you. Yes, I just reflecting on what Di has just said, how incredibly sad it is that there are 2 young people who are so challenged in whatever ways it is, that it is almost impossible to find them a placement. That is just heartbreaking, and I hope that they now have that security, and I wish them all the best, and I hope they grow up to be fine young people, and I'm sure they will do if they're getting the support that they clearly need at this time. Let's keep our fingers crossed for them. But yeah, it's always heartbreaking to hear of such challenges. Reflecting on the fact that I have absolutely zero idea of any of the detail, and it's quite right that I don't have, but you know, it's really, really hard to hear of such challenging situations. So I hope that they're in a much better place than they were. I have another quick question really. I'm really pleased to see that the short breaks is outstanding, and I think it's been outstanding for quite some considerable time as well. So it's always really good to see that is as it is. My question is, does everybody who wishes to use that service have access to it? Is there a capacity? Do we have capacity to give a short break to every family that needs one or use one?
I think through obviously through assessment, through kind of a consultation and an assessment and care planning process, yes, would be my first answer. Is you know, everything that we do is placement match. Certainly at short breaks with disabilities is carefully monitored, and the schedules are kind of finely tuned to make sure that when we've got multiple groups in there, they can, I suppose, work together more organically. The reason, obviously, with London Brook now as it stands, the reason why it's not had a judgment this year is because it hasn't been inspected yet, but we've got 2 months to go. But yeah, you're correct in what you say. It's been 3 years outstanding. And, you know, like I always say, I reflect on the last 12 months to where we're at today. I can't anticipate anything different, but I've said that about 2 of my homes this time around. So I'm not even going to call it. But I sincerely hope that they get the Julie deserves, because, you know, the culture of that home is something special.
That's really good to hear. And thanks for raising that, Dot. I too would be very pleased. I am very pleased to hear about the seriously challenged young people. Not that they are there or their problems they're facing, but that we have stepped forward in being unable to find a place elsewhere, and we have stepped forward and are working with them. And I support Dot's comments and as to their future, and I have every confidence from what Guy is saying that will happen. Jumping to commerciality, if we have an organisation which is known to be good at dealing with really challenged young people, there's a commercial benefit there potentially for us as well, not just the very appropriate one of looking after those young people who come from our area, but in terms of bringing in challenged young people from outside the authority and generating income for that. I just throw that one in as an aside. Very briefly, I was brought up in a children's home. Because my parents ran the children's home, they developed a skill for dealing with difficult young people. The problem for them was they got lumbered with all the difficult young people because they were good at it. But I put that in the positive context here, that if we prove to be good at it, then it's going to be good for those young people, but it also might start generating some income. And moving on with that thought, I've been a great supporter of our own residential homes for some time, and it's good to see it coming to fruition. Just looking ahead, could we be potentially in a year, 2, 3 years' time, be in a situation where we don't need to have young people leaving the authority to get residential care, apart from those who need to because of family constraints or issues associated with it? Is that something we could realistically aim for, and with all the financial benefits as well along with that? I just asked that question. Is that a possibility? Is that something we're working towards?
I think from my perspective, and I'm probably not the industry expert on this area, but from my perspective and what happens operates is that there is a conscious effort to look at reunification with families or extended family or you know, friends of family. That is operationally happening. You know, social workers are investing in that. The care teams that I'm responsible for, we make it a bit of a standing item. You know, whilst, you know, relationships with parents might be fractured now, it doesn't mean that there's not a possibility, you know, down the line. I suppose it's forming some stability. The teams within the homes building relationships with the family to repair the relationship between parents, build confidence back into the relationships, and we do it on a step-by-step hand-holding process. And then social care are involved within that, but there's a time when they do become involved in that. If we did that straight away from day one of admission, there is I suppose the reality of the possibilities over a period of time, that would always be a plan. And I think one of the South Central Halifax home Every young person who spent time in there has been reunified with family or extended family or grandparents. There's only 2 that have moved on to post-16 provisions. That's because of circumstances, you know, with the families that are just unable to kind of care for them. The North Halifax at home, not the one that is currently graded good, I would say they are experts at transitional work to post-16 and supported living. The process they've got in place and the life opportunities that they've given young people from their discharge point of the children's home has been excellent. And they have to, we talk about the letting go process. These young people are still very much connected to the homes. They will come in, they will have tea, so they're familiarised with a family that they've spent a long time with. So it's quite an organic way, but it's not a case of just because you've been gone, you're not gone, so to speak. There's an open invitation to these young people, and it works. And that home, you know, at North Halifax is, I would say it's a flagship within our service, that they do this bit really well. But equally, you know, we talk about learning. We're putting measures in place to kind of bridge that gap even further. So we're strengthening that independence, you know, so they're more equipped, you know, to deal with those softer skills, you know, that you're going to need when you're living on your own. But yeah, so that there is some success in that. And I think, to answer your question, yeah, there's a conscious effort about, you know, permanency, you know, for these young people.
That's good to hear. Thank you for that, Guy. I think we've probably given you a fair old grilling. Lucy, did you want to come in and do your bit on your side of things for us? Or Dot, just a second, Dot's put a hand up. Did you want to come in on something that Guy had been saying? Sorry, I missed that.
No, that's fine. It was literally, as you said, giving you a fair old grilling. I thought I'd stick my hand up again. I just wanted to ask quickly about the national picture and the fact that the quote from the government report says that operating profit margins averaging 22.6%. Is it me, or is that enormous? I mean, bearing in mind that I have nothing to compare it with, so I wouldn't know if it was vast or minute, and I suspect it's probably enormous. And does this mean, therefore, that we have a similar problem with children's homes as we do with adult social care homes, where we have managing companies raking in millions and paying their chief executives millions of pounds, whereas councils are thrown to the dogs, having to pay the bills and not have anything to pay them with? And is the whole system therefore broken? And it's a bit of an open-ended question, and I don't expect you to be able to answer it, but it would be useful to know sort of where that 22.6% falls within the general scheme of things, and whether it is ridiculously huge or not. Thank you.
Sorry, it's a good reason for us to be doing it rather than giving the profits to them, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't mind coming in on that. I don't know if Guy wants to as well, but I'd encourage you to read the Competition and Markets Authority report, because it highlights exactly what you've just said. It is the request was for an intervention to cap market the profits that independent providers make, and that hasn't been, and there's no sign that it will be implemented. But yeah, it's a huge profit margin.
I don't think with our current government that's very likely. Sorry, I'm being political now. Lucy, do you want to carry on with your side of things?
I will, but Di's just put a hand up.
Political.
I'm happy to go, but Di just had a hand up. Did you want to come in, Di?
Oh yes, sorry, Miss.
Yeah. So sorry, it was only quickly. I'm just conscious of time, but yeah, just to say to obviously to members that this was fully explored, wasn't it, in the Josh McAllister review? So there was a lot of concern raised by directors of social care and practitioners and everybody working in the sector about the concern about the ever rising costs of external placements, our reliance on external providers, but about the profits that they're making. So it was this has been raised and taken up by Josh McAllister. We'll see how the government respond next week in their response to that, but yeah, it's been disappointing that it doesn't look like they're going to put a cap on those fees. But yeah, there's a lot of concern because you're dealing with very traumatized children, You know, that's what they're in the business of providing care for. So the fact that some people are getting very rich on the back of it, it causes a lot of concern in the sector.
Yeah, totally. Yes, right. Go on then, Lucy.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of the slides. The first one around external placements is around the placement activity. And I wanted to just offer some, I suppose, reassurance about what we do, so that you can be assured that we are thorough in our decision making when we look for an external placement. But I chair the external placements panel, and it's a multi-agency panel. We have health at the table, we have education, we have adult services, and obviously ourselves in children's services. And we look at the referrals, we look at those that have been waiting a long time, as well as new referrals. We look at additional requests. We get additional funding requests for some providers for the more complex interventions, and we look at the high cost placements. We review those, and we review all external residential placements on a regular basis to make sure that not only is it the right thing for that child, but what the trajectory is, what are we doing to support that child, because our ethos is that every child should live with a family where they can, whether that's their own family or a foster family. And I think slide, I don't know the numbering in the pack, but the slide that gives the average cost of residential fostering and independent placements, and the slide that gives the year-on-year trend shows an increase in fostering, and that's because we are putting in a concerted effort for children to live within a family setting. So if the option was internal residential or an independent fostering agency, we would probably nearly always opt for the independent fostering agency, even though it's a commission placement, because that child is remaining within a family setting, which is the right thing. Obviously, we take into account the match and the suitability. What I will say, I'm jumping a little bit on the external placements and fostering recruitment, but we've seen a huge decrease in the number of inquiries nationally in terms of foster carers wanting to, families wanting to enter into fostering, and COVID has had a huge impact on that. And I don't necessarily mean the lockdowns, but I mean people's perspectives on what they can manage. And I think a lot of people, or not many people, have come out of COVID feeling all refreshed and ready for a new challenge. Most people are coming out of COVID feeling a little bit exhausted. And I think we've seen that in our fostering numbers. And our fostering numbers have gone down, but not because any of our foster carers are unhappy. We haven't had any foster carers leave to move to an IFA in the last 2 years. We've just had natural aging out of foster carers. They've reached an age where they want to retire, and we're trying to increase the number of connected carers who move towards special guardianship, because we want to promote that permanence for the child where it's appropriate. And so a different set of data would show our special guardianship figures increasing, which is a really positive thing, but it just means that our total fostering households has reduced. We are looking very creatively about how we increase our cohort of mainstream foster carers and what they do. So currently our mainstream foster carers offer long-term, short-term and short breaks, and we want to increase that to supported lodgings, which is a post-16 placement option, because at the moment, other than foster care, we don't have any supported living type offers from an internal point of view. They're all commissioned, which is, again, you can see the numbers rising. So we're wanting to recruit more supported lodgings carers, and we need to recruit more carers that can support families with complex needs, those kinds of short breaks. We need to increase those. But our last, I suppose, 12 to 18 months of our recruitment has been to see what works in a kind of a post-COVID era. There's been a huge move to digital platforms since COVID. It was already building through social media, but the landscape is quite different to what it used to be. So the last year has been looking at spreading our fostering recruitment budget, if you like, to look at all the different avenues. And I'd like to see next year us focusing on those areas that that work. IFAs do really well through Google Ads. If you ever Google fostering, the independent agencies are right at the top, and that's what we need to be doing. We need to do it. So that might mean, you know, not doing something else, but investing a little bit more money in areas that we're seeing the best results. And we're also focusing on a regional approach to recruitment. So our partners in Leeds, Wakefield, Kirklees and Bradford, and some other outlier areas meet up regularly. We have a regional kind of comms approach called Foster for Your Local Authority, and I can see that building and growing, sharing resources over the next few years, because our local authority partners are not our competitors. The independent fostering agencies are our competitors. So we're just looking at how we can use our recruitment and advertising budgets a little bit more smartly in the coming years. So going back to the external placements, that team, the external placements team, has been in post since 2021, and they've made a huge difference to how we monitor and maintain those placements. But they have just they are recruiting and extending so that they can further develop their kind of contract management. So the questions that you were asking at the beginning around regulated provision and the semi-independent market, the external placements team will be able to spend more time looking into developing relationships with those providers, so that we are aware of where there's difficulties and where there's strengths, and which are our preferred providers, which is done at the moment, but just not as much as we'd like. So we're creating more capacity to enable them to do that. And there is a section within our external placements where we say, are there any concerns about any providers? And we talk about those, and we talk about next steps. So yeah, it's always monitored. I've jumped about a bit, but I think that's probably everything I wanted to cover.
Well, one thing that's bouncing around in my head is the information about looking after young people with complex needs. Just, are you able to give us a feel for sort of numbers here within Calderdale, where you would broadly say that we have young people with complex needs? We're talking 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000?
It's a really difficult question to answer, because it depends what you mean by complex needs. So if you're talking about children with a physical or sensory impairment that might be accessing the short breaks provision, I don't know the answer to that. I'd say the majority of our children who are in an external residential placement probably have a level of complexity that is related to developmental trauma or early life experiences that need more support than what foster care has been able to offer. And I say the majority because we always want to work with those children to get them to a point where they can go and live in a family setting, and that's the purpose of our external placements panel, to kind of monitor that. So there are some young people who are ready for that, and we're actively searching for foster placements for them.
Any idea of those numbers, though, however you define them in terms of complex needs?
Well, we've got, I think it's in the slide. I think we've got 30, just under 30 young people in external residential.
It gives the sort of emphasises the need or lesser need of it, depending on numbers, doesn't it? Because clearly people with complex needs need lots of different support. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Any questions for Lucy from other board members? I think you're going to be given an easier time here.
I think I'm very grateful. Thank you.
I think those are all my questions. Yes. So thank you for that. Thank you, in particular, Guy and Lucy, for your presentation on that. Shall we move on to item 7 now, which is the SACRE report, the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education report. Now, am I correct in thinking this is actually for 2 years? I think, Sheila, you were going to introduce it for us and give bullet points, weren't you? Sheila Hurst. Sorry, you're on mute, Sheila. Sheila, you're on mute. That's it.
Sorry about that.
We didn't get any of that, I'm afraid.
No,
So
it's my fault. I'm so busy with the picture keeps changing for some reason. And I just want to say that, you know, what a privilege and pleasure it is to be chair of SACRE for the last few years, you know, with, you know, when you think that SACRE members are predominantly volunteers, and we're very lucky to have the support of Ian Ross, our RE consultant, was actually the powerhouse behind us, making sure we keep on track. So he'll be coming in later. But I just want to start by saying, you know, thank you for arranging for us to be able to bring this report to you, this year's report and last year's report, which somehow we managed not to quite get on the agenda in time. And I know, you know, and just to say thank you that, you know, we understand it's going to be a standing regular item now every January, which is just after the report is published. So that is absolutely great. So it is a retrospective report covering the last academic year. You know, as I say, we just, you know, are very pleased to bring this report to you on behalf of SACRE. And it does mean that by bringing this report to you, we fulfil one of our statutory duties in reporting to you as council members, as well as nationally to the Department for Education. And I'm not sure how many of you know or understand what SACRE is about.
I think it's useful to explain it, Sheila, for people.
Yeah, well, I've got some notes to do just that.
Excellent, thank you.
So it's the Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education. And since 1988 even, you know, local authorities have a duty to establish a SACRE. And, you know, because religious education is still a statutory part of the basic curriculum for all pupils throughout school. That's primary and secondary, even though it's not part of the national curriculum. And so instead, that responsibility, you know, rested with the local authority. And the SACRE, really, our job is to advise the local authority on matters relating to collective worship and RE teaching in maintained schools, you know, all about the religious education that our children in Calderdale receive, and to also produce a locally agreed syllabus. And as part of SACRE, what we do is monitor the effectiveness and appropriateness of that syllabus, and that is formally reviewed every 5 years, and that is due to come up for renewal in 2024. So we've already started work on that this year. And SACRE is made up of 4 committees, really, including representatives from the Church of England, LA councillors, teachers and other faith representatives. And in brief, our duties are, as I've said, to monitor RE provision and produce an annual report for the Secretary of State, to monitor and support collective worship, to agree determinations, and that's about agreeing, you know, schools can agree with SACRE that they can change their collective worship from being wholly, mainly and broadly Christian to wholly, mainly, broadly of the faith of the children of the school. But that has to be agreed with SACRE. And as I said, we have to produce an agreed syllabus for RE in our community schools and to revise this every 5 years, and also to support the religious education in schools through training and resources. So I hope you've had a chance to look at both reports. There is a slight difference between the reports because this year we have actually followed the NASICA, which is the National Associations for SACRE, and the DFE have agreed a format for the reports now, which makes it easier for them to compare them. So we actually followed that this year instead of the usual format that we've used previously. Had the same information, it's just been organised a bit differently. And it includes reports on the work of SACRE and the Council's fulfilment of its obligations, provision of our RE, collective worship and determinations, summary of what our achievements have been and our priorities, examination results, professional development and consultancy, SACRE membership and attendance, and relevant national and local context. And just to go on from that, really, you know, Calderdale's SACRE remains committed to promoting quality RE and collective worship in our schools. And one of the most encouraging things that has happened this year is the take-up from Calderdale schools of the offer for professional sport and training to enhance their current provision. And we were very pleased to learn as SACRE that, you know, through the funding of RA networks and for both secondary and primary schools, over half of the schools in Calderdale attended. So that allowed for consistency of RE across the, you know, Calderdale, and sharing of resources with each other as well. That's an important part. And as well as that, there's a RE coordinators network events. Calderdale and Kirklees last year did a joint SACRE RE conference. So we do lots of things to support our schools. As well as that, schools can actually request individual support as well. And for the first time this year, Calderdale also undertook a self-evaluation review. And again, that was based on the National Associations for SACRE's 10th plan. And that was really a key thing and a bit of a turning point, I think, for us this year. Because while we'd done bits of that, we actually had a framework to follow in which we could judge how we were doing. And that has, you know, has been key for us to be able to develop our priorities for work in 2022, 23 and 24. And apologies that this is playing up again. That's it. And, you know, so another of our key priorities for us is, as part of that review, is we wanted to broaden the makeup of our SACRE and try to get more people involved. We also wanted to broaden the other organisations and partnerships that we work with. And all this is included in the report. And, but, you know, sort of especially we started last year working in collaboration with other West Yorkshire SACREs, and that has been really beneficial to our work. And, you know, as we share things of common interest and concerns, issues, sharing good practice and experience. And, you know, so we're able to learn so much from each other. And one of the other things that our self-evaluation tool is really, we want to build up regular communication between the work of the council and our responsibilities of SACRE. And really, you know, one of the things we're going to be asking for is we'd like to initiate regular updates from the assistant director responsible for looking after SACRE or overseeing the work that we're doing, really. And, you know, we want to do that to make sure that our priorities are linked to the council's priorities. You know, we're working for the benefit of our children. So, you know, we need to be working together, and the more we can do with that, we think the better it will help us. And so I think we just need to let you know that we are aware that a freedom of information request has been sent to all local authorities from the National Association of SACREs. And this is looking at the funding of SACRE. We've been relatively lucky in Calderdale, as we do seem to be getting the recommended 2% of the, is it the schools? I've forgotten, the CSSB. I forgot what that stands for now. But it's the basic money that Calderdale get for supporting schools. We do get our 2%, and we are very lucky because a lot of Sacrays don't get anything. And so we're very grateful for that. And but the authority will be asked for information about that, so it can be compared against other local authorities. And we're very grateful that some councillors, also make up one of our groups of Sacray, and they do attend on a very regular basis. If you look at the attendance, the councillors are amongst the better attenders, and we're very conscious that we need to get on Sacray a much wider representation. And especially as we're beginning to review the RE curriculum in the syllabus for this next year. And we just hope that the funding for Sacray still matches that recommended 2%, as that will allow us the flexibility to continue towards working for the excellence that is already happening in our school, but to make it wider and better. And I think, just very briefly, our main priorities for next year, if I move to next year's priorities, is that it centres on things like communication, information and guidance, and making sure we've got the right information for those people that want it. It's also about ensuring that there's suitable professional development and support. Ian might be able to talk more about this, as well as our own strategy and what our priorities are. And one of the big things that Sacray is very keen to do, of course, is promoting understanding and tolerance of other people, through faith communities and sharing of things. And, a lot of it, advice and guidance is written and updated and sent to schools to support them. And particularly, we know that we've got, an RE policy template. We help people prepare for a deep dive from Ofsted in RE. We have information on RE and collective worship withdrawal guidance, inclusive collective worship guidance, collective worship policy template as well. And we also offer RE reviews and, if you like, a Sacray and Merit Award, as well as the advice to schools on managing sensitive issues. That's a document we worked on this year, sensitive issues around faith, including fasting and uniforms and things like that. And in 2021, which was the previous year, if you look in that, we did, participate in a document called Voices and Viewpoints, which is all about RSHE curriculum. While we don't actually have a remit for that, we felt it was an important piece of work that we could do about looking at how these relate to different faiths and other non-faith perspective. So I'm going to leave it there. Ian, I'm going to ask you to sort of fill in anything I've missed or go into a bit more detail.
Thank you, Sheila. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you very much, Sheila, for that wonderful introduction. I don't think you've ever been called a powerhouse before. Welcome. Good to see everybody. Lovely to see you once again this year. So I'm Ian Ross, and I work for Pennine Learning, and we are contracted by Calderdale Council to support RE and collective worship and the work of Sacray. And I think Sheila's covered most of the ground there. Just to say that sort of one of the key things that we are working on this year, especially on the ground with teachers, is around planning a coherent, cohesive, progressive curriculum, which sounds like a sort of big Ofsted phrase, doesn't it? Because that's what schools are being asked for all the time. How do you know that your curriculum is cohesive and progressive? We have been two schools in Calderdale have been selected to take part in a review with HMI, looking specifically at their RE, because HMI and Ofsted are writing what they call long reports, and the long reports come out on each subject. They haven't done them for about 10 years now. and they've just reinstated them kind of this year. So we know that 2 schools have been selected out of 25. There's only 25 schools nationally, so 2 in one local authority. It's like strange. So they've selected 2 schools to do a deep dive and subject inspection in RE. So we've been supporting them in that process as well. So I think Sheila's covered the ground with most of the things. We are really pleased that we are funded to provide networks for teachers and for specialists in RE, and to provide that training and support. And you know, we've reached well over 50% of the schools in Calderdale doing that. We also offer some practical days which are really great for pupils, called diversity days, where it's work online, but they meet people of faith. And I think the last one we had in Calderdale last year on spring celebrations, we reached 1,500 pupils all working on RE that week and joining in with video conversations. So huge successes. So that's kind of our work. So open to any questions now from anybody who has anything that they want to ask us about SACRE and RE.
My only comment so far is that when you look at the list of those people who are members of SACRE board or committee or whatever you call it, it's quite diverse, which is good, and it represents the diversity across the borough that we have. You've got a couple of vacancies at the moment, or a few vacancies at the moment. Are those long-standing? I mean, for example,
yes. Unfortunately, we haven't managed to keep our Islamic representatives at all. They sort of come and go. We have rules that sort of govern our constitution, which is if you haven't attended a meeting for 3 sessions, you're asked to kind of, are you prepared to stay or are you going to go? And it's like, if we don't hear anything, then they get removed from the register, as it were. So yes, we do struggle with some faith representatives. And it's always nice if we get more councillors there, because you know it's not fair that both Councillor Monteith and Councillor Foster are always there. You know, it is nice if we could get a few more councillors just to share the load for them as well.
Yes, you'll have to have substitutes, Dot and Brenda, where necessary, to give you a break to move on. I was on SACRE years ago, and I haven't been involved for a long time now. Any questions, though, from other members? I mean, very, very detailed reports, and it's good to see all the activity which is going on, which I was not really aware of, I have to say, and it's wonderful to see all that. I think I saw a hand go up there. Brenda, was that you? Yes, Councillor Monteith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that SACRE, although it sounds like it might be quite dry stuff, it isn't in reality. It's one of the bodies that I serve on that I find most stimulating and most interesting. So I'm never particularly looking to find a substitute, because the meetings are always worthwhile and always worth my time in attending them. So thank you for that, Ian, and thank you for that, Sheila, for making them as they are. Very friendly, very inclusive, and well worth my time. Thank you.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
And Dot seems to agree, which is good. Yeah. Excellent.
I do have, if I could come in, I do have to say we do struggle with membership. You know, the councillors' membership is not one of them, but we do struggle for membership in other areas. And just recently with the C of E committee as well. So there has been a shifting round. I was a member in one category, and I've shifted to another category. But you know, if anybody wants to, you know, to join SACRE in any of the groups, we would more than welcome you with open hand. The more views and perspectives we have, the better our output would be. And we've done a lot of work this year in particular. We've managed to get on the mailing list for the let me get it right, the interfaith community. So we've started to build up relationships there, which is proving useful, and we hope to expand on that. So, you know, if anybody's aware of anybody we should be making relationships with, we'd love to hear from them, really.
Good, and thank you very much for that, and thank you for the work you do. I think there's not enough thought about faith and things other than finance and in science and industry and all the politics and stuff. I can understand Brenda and Dot enjoying the context of the sorts of agenda items that you'll be covering. And so thank you for the work you do, and thank you for bringing.
Can I ask something, Ashley? Sorry, I have to have my hand up. I think you must have missed me.
Lost you. Yeah, there
That's
you go.
All right. Just I wanted to say, just sort of in support of the work that goes on, that my daughter's just completed her religious studies GCSE at Todd High, and I know from first hand what good stuff goes on there, and so I could sort of see from the report, I could relate to some of the things that were said. I was just interested, just really briefly, around the kind of sensitivities potentially around beliefs, relationships, sex and health education, and kind of issues that potentially come up, and how kind of you felt able to deal with those, and how that's worked kind of in practice. You've obviously been doing quite a lot around that.
Yeah, obviously, one of the as Sheila mentioned, the document that we produced last year, so for 2021, was called Voices and Viewpoints, where we took the views of as many faith representatives as we could around key elements of the RSHE curriculum, including sort of same-sex relationships and various other sort of kind of hot potatoes, as it were. So to say, you know, this is what people of faith and people of non-faith are saying around these areas. So it's kind of almost like a resource for teachers to help them manage some of those tricky situations that they might come across in the classroom. So, you know, we were in that wonderful position where we could reach out for that range of people. And it's a document that's been produced across 4 SACREs across West Yorkshire. So we've managed to get kind of quite a wide perspective of views. That's why we've called it Views, Voices and Viewpoints, because it's not, you know, doesn't necessarily sit with the liturgical or the doctrinal things of a kind of established church. It might be, you know, actually, yeah, that's what the church believes, but this is what I believe. So it kind of gives those sort of personal viewpoints as well.
That's good to hear. Yeah, thank you for that, Diana. Does that cover what you were seeking there?
Yeah, no, I'm just interested to hear what was going on, and it sounds positive.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, can't see any more hands. Thank you very much for once again, Ian and Sheila, for that, and please keep up the good work. Just move on to the final item on the agenda there, the work programme. Mike, do you want to pick up the work programme?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what I should do first, and I tried to at the beginning, but I didn't get in, was to introduce Ben Marshall to members of the Scrutiny Board. Ben is the newest member of our team in the Scrutiny Support Team, and he's going to be working with me on Children and Young People Scrutiny Board in the way that Lauren did before. So just welcome, Ben, and I'm sure you'll all get to meet Ben.
And Ben already got well stuck into things, I'm pleased to say. So
online or face to face very soon.
Yes.
There's a couple of things cropped up in the discussion, suggestions either for briefings from Julie and her team, or items for future agendas, and Ben and I will look at that tomorrow and make suggestions for amending the work programme. Just to say that the joint working party you set up with Adults Health and Social Care Scrutiny Board, looking at the Buying Our Care report that Councillor Evans is chairing, is continuing its work. It met this afternoon with colleagues from the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. It meets again tomorrow with the Director of Adult Services, Kath Gomali, and colleagues. And so that work is advancing. It's being done in a working group, and that will be reported at the end of February in public. And the only other thing I think to say is to ask whether any members, apart from what we've already noted this evening, want us to look at other items for the agenda, particularly before the end of the municipal year, so the next 2 meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything anybody wishes to raise here, or if not, I'm sure Mike will be perfectly happy to receive an email from you if you think of something after the meeting or in future. And we've taken on board, as Mike said, a number of the things, and particularly things like Councillor Issett's comments in relation to the budgetary side and a number of other things. So thank you. May I thank you all for your contribution this evening. Thanks for coming along. And I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.